Hello?
Commissioner Davis, are you still there?
Yes, uh-huh.
And
Can you hear me?
yes, I can. And Commissioner Kircher, are you there?
I am here.
Okay, awesome.
Hi, Denise.
Hi there.
Uh-huh.
It's now 6:30. I'd like to call to order the Regional Planning Commission public hearing for Thursday, December the 1st. And as customary, we'll start off with the pledge. And tonight, I'd like to have Mr. Mark Kennedy lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Pledges to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic and one nation under God indivisible with all.
Thank you, Mark. Sarah, now I'll come to you for a roll call and determination of quorum.
Mr. Peterman? Absent. Mr. Servon?
Present.
Mrs. Karcher?
Here.
Mr. Galvery?
Here.
Mr. Mills?
Here.
Mr. Davis?
Here on the phone.
Mr. Jester?
Here.
So we have 6 present. You do have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Also in front of you, you have tonight's agenda, which has a listing of the projects and everything on it. If there's no changes, I'll entertain a motion in a second.
Move to approve. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Sarah, call the commission.
Mr. Servon?
Yes to approve.
Mrs. Karcher?
Yes.
Mr. Galvery?
Yes.
Mr. Mills?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Jester?
Yes to approve.
So you have 6 yeas in favor of approving tonight's agenda.
Thank you once again, and we'll come right back to you for the introduction and public hearing instructions.
Thank you.
Sir, good evening. This is Dave Peterman. I'm on the line now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This public hearing is being conducted for the purpose of giving the citizens of the county the opportunity to present testimony on applications before the Regional Planning Commission. Everyone will have a chance to speak. All statements are to be made from the podium at the front of the room. All testimony given shall be sworn or affirmed. For the record, please give your name and address. Copies of any written statements or exhibits used during the hearing should be presented for identification and inclusion in the record. The record will remain open for 2 business days following tonight's hearing. For each application before the commission, the chairman will introduce the application. Then the applicant or representative will be given 15 minutes to present. Then those in favor of the application will be allotted 5 minutes each to speak. Then those opposed to the application will be allotted 5 minutes each to speak. When everyone has had an opportunity to give testimony, the hearing on the application will be closed. No decision will be made by the commission tonight. The commission will hold a public business meeting on Thursday, December 8th at 6:30 p.m., at which time it will make a decision on the applications voted tonight. All information of record will be considered, and a common vote of 4 members shall be required to make a decision. Anyone may attend the business meeting, but no new testimony will be received. The public notice of this hearing was published on November 11, 2022, and November 15, 2022 in the Delaware State News. The Kent County Levy Court will hear these applications on Tuesday, December 20th, 2022 at 7 p.m. unless tabled by the Commission or withdrawn prior to the Levy Court hearing. Levy Court also meets in this room. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we'll get into our applications to be heard tonight. The first application is AP-22-03, and this is an application, kind of applications I certainly enjoy hearing coming, preservation districts. District name is American District K22-10-302. Applicant owner is Leslie S. American. Trustee and John W. American. 541 9-Foot Road, Greenwood, Delaware 19950. Present zoning district is AC, Agriculture Conservation, and AR, Agriculture Residential. Proposed zoning district is same with Agriculture Preservation Overlay, AP10. Levy Court District is Mr. Howell, the 6th. School District is Lake Forest. Fire District is Harrington, Station 50. Area and location is 414.81 plus or minus acres, located on the south side of Vernon Road, Delaware Route 14, and on the east side of Flatiron Road, west of Harrington. Is there anyone here tonight to represent this application? I had talked earlier today to Mrs. American, so I know her personally, and I wanted to congratulate her on going into the preservation, but I wanted some background information on this particular project. So she's very thrilled about getting into it and about a local farmer purchasing it. So I will ask once again, is there anyone here to represent this application? Third and final call. Anyone here to represent this application? Anyone here opposed to this application? Anyone here opposed to this application? Third and final call. Anyone here opposed to this application? Or does any of the commissioners have any questions for staff?
You said that you talked to the applicant today, and I was just wondering if there's anything that you learned that you'd like to share.
No, I just know American Leslie from a long time. She's actually on the Tree Farm Committee and the Governor's Council for Tree Farms. So she's a very great conservationist, and I was certainly glad to hear her putting this large parcel into the Preservation Act, and a local farmer, I think, is then going to be purchasing it as it says on the contract. Good. Thank you very much. So then next week, anybody on the phone, Mark?
So if there's anyone that's joining us online or by phone, if you'd like to speak in favor or in opposition to this application, please press *3 on your phone or use your raised hand icon that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. I see no hands raised online at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. So we'll be taking this application up next week. Next on the agenda tonight, our next ordinance number is LC 22-22. Application number and name is CZ-22-09, Rob's Rides, LLC. Applicant is Davis, Bowen, and Friedel, Incorporated. Attention, Rinksview Ladner, PE, 1 Park Avenue, Milford, Delaware, 19963. Owner is Rob's Rides, LLC, 3697 Bay Road, Milford, Delaware, 19963. Present use is single-family residential. Present zoning and comp plan designation is AC, Agriculture Conservation, Low-Density Residential. Proposed zoning is BG, General Business, Highway Commercial. Relation to gross zone is inside. Levy Court District is the 4th. School District is Milford. Fire District is Frederica, Station 49. 2 parcels totaling 1.099 plus or minus acres located on the west road approximately 996 feet southeast of Katydid Lane and approximately 7,324 feet north of Old Cemetery Road, southeast of Federica. Is there someone here to represent this application?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission.
Is our attorney on the line? So if you can either be sworn or affirmed by our attorney, so listen to what he has to say.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Mr.
Can
Lyson.
everyone hear me? Okay, Mr. Lardner, good evening. Do you swear or affirm, sir, to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and just keep the mic to your face like you got it. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. For the record, my name is Ring Lardner, a professional engineer and principal with the firm Davis, Bowen, and Friedel, 1 Park Avenue, Milford, Delaware, 19963. With me this evening is Mr. Robbie Medding, the managing member of the applicant Rob's Rides, LLC. Also here in the audience with him is his father, Mr. Medding, and his sons, Covey and Dayton. Tonight we're here requesting a favorable recommendation to rezone 2 parcels of land, approximately 1.099 acres, from agricultural conservation to general business, and to change the comprehensive map plan from low-density residential to highway commercial. We did receive a copy of the staff recommendation report on Monday and have reviewed it. We note that the enclosures were not included in the report, and I noticed that some are not online as well. Skip, I'm not sure if you're aware of that or not. But having said that, the data sheet, Exhibit A, is online. We're familiar with the comp plan and the rezoning area. Those were Exhibits B and C. The other documents were the support facility report from DelDOT, of which we had gotten a copy when that was first provided. And then we were able to obtain a copy of a letter from the Momberg firm that was dated in November. So we do have a copy. I was able to review everything. I just wanted to let you know for transparency purposes that was there in case anyone in the audience or online had cared to view those.
Before you go on, I think you had a question for Sarah, and did you get a chance to answer his question when he started stating about something when you did your presentation?
I didn't have a question, no, sir.
Okay, go right ahead.
In a normal setting, I'd keep it brief, and I still promise to be brief tonight and way less than the 15 minutes that are allowed. To say that, yes, we have read the staff report, we concur with the recommendations provided by the staff, and in this case, there's a couple other things I want to address besides that. So I'd like to ask that the recommendation as written be considered as part of our testimonies. I know it's on us to provide the testimony, so instead of rereading that recommendation report, I just ask that it be included in and for the record on behalf of the applicant. There are a couple portions of the Momberg letter that I would like to address. First, we note that the firm represents 3 adjacent landowners. I'm able to point on the screen. How does this bonus? The new technology has been here since I've been here for a while, so. The 3 properties that they represent is 1 property there, 2nd property here, and a 3rd property there. The 4th property mentioned in the letter is a property that's about 0.8 of a mile north of the site located in the town of Frederica, and all 4 of them express interest in this application. We note that the Momberg letter states that all those parties, the 4 parties I just mentioned, are not opposed to the rezonings. I say again, they are not opposed to the rezonings. However, the letter discusses future site plans, access, corridor capacity, the South Frederica Master Plan, and the Comprehensive Plan. It's also my understanding that a meeting was held on Tuesday night with some adjacent landowners or property business owners to discuss similar items, and not specifically this application. As this body is aware, tonight's application is about the rezoning. All of the other items, such as site plan, access, corridor capacity, they are all site plan issues that if and when this applicant or another applicant decides to apply for a site plan project, they will be required to comply with the appropriate regulations and requirements at the time of including access. Mr. Menning is a local businessman whom has assisted his neighbors, has been supportive of the county and our citizens. He has improved his business to include relocating and rebuilding existing entrance on Bay Road at his sole cost. Furthermore, Mr. Menning was a member of the South Frederica Master Working Group that developed that master plan. In summary, Mr. Menning is just trying to improve the two parcels that are adjacent to his parcel, as he owns the one in red, the ones in here. So again, it's just improving those areas to be consistent with what he currently owns. This area is designated for transition to commercial. There is industrial designation in the comprehensive plan about 500 feet. It's just to the south. You see a little purple area. That is industrial as zoned. So you can see that it's just closing the gap, if you will, between the general business and the industrial land use designation. The proposed rezoning is consistent with the South Frederica Master Plan and is consistent with the surrounding areas. We thank you for your time this evening, and we're here to answer any questions that the commission may have of us.
Does any commissioners have any questions at this time, either on the phone or here up front? Do you have anybody, Mark?
I do. Dave Peterman.
You can
I
proceed.
have a question.
Proceed, Mr. Peterman.
Okay. What do you have any idea what commercial lots business would be put on that lots if it goes commercial?
Mr. Peter, if I understood your question correct, it's a little hard to hear in here. It's a little quiet. It's what is the proposed commercial for this property? Should it be rezoned? Okay. The answer is nothing at this point in time. There are two existing houses that are on the property that will continue to be used for that purpose. And at some point in time, should any applicant decide to purchase that property and develop it, it will then come through as a site plan. But there is no present proposed use for that site other than what's currently being used today.
Thank you.
Does any other commissioner have any questions for the engineer? Is that somebody asking a question, Mark? I thank you, sir.
That answers my question.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here would like to speak in favor of this project? Anyone else here would like to speak in favor of this project? Third and final call. Anyone else here would like to speak in favor of this project? Going to the against. Is there anyone here that would like to speak against this project? Anybody on the phone for either for or against this project, Mark?
If there's anyone joining us online that would like to speak in favor or in opposition to this project, please press star 3 or raise your electronic hand. I see no hands raised at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, last call. Is anybody here like to speak against this project? Seeing none or hearing none from the phone, we will take up this project next week. Thank you very much. Next on tonight's agenda is LC 22-23, zoning. This is a rather long reading of an ordinance, and I don't know if I have to read this, Sarah, or to put it into read it for everybody because they got a copy of it in front of them and they know what it's about. What's our attorney's suggestion? I can say that it's just a zoning ordinance. For several years, planning services have been working on rewrite of the permitted uses and bulk regulations portions of Chapter 205 zoning. The intent of the project is to modernize the code, make it easier to use, and amend some provisions that tend to result in an inordinate number of variance requests. In general, the first half of the chapter has been reorganized and consolidated. The second half of the chapter, including parking and signage, will be addressed separately. Having looked at this, and I had talked to Sarah earlier, I think there's quite a bit of things in here, that a lot of things that I am particularly been wanting to see for years. But there's also some things in here that I have questions about. I think it's very lengthy in itself, and has a lot to say. And before I go any farther, I'm going to open up to the commission members. Anybody on the phone? Sarah, would you like to say something first?
If I could go through a very brief presentation to sort of consolidate what this ordinance is for you, and then go into questions that might be helpful.
The floor is yours.
Thank you.
You should do that. Thank you.
Thank you. First, if we look at the screen, let's note this is the 50th anniversary of zoning in Kent County. The ordinance we've been using, in fact, is 30 years old and was ripe for a bit of an overhaul. So this ordinance started out as an effort just to modernize it, because again, it's 30 years old. The permitted uses don't reflect the current economy. We wanted to increase the usability of it. The ordinance as it stands now is incredibly complicated. So we wanted to simplify it, mostly simplifying its layout so it's easier for everybody to use. Fix a number of things that just haven't been working that lead to a fair few variance requests suggesting that they're not working in the county and ought to be changed. And then we just cleaned up some items. Again, as the chairman mentioned, we didn't touch effectively the back half of the entire zoning ordinance. Those will do as they need to be done individually. So in general, some of these, we've also tried to address some enforcement complaints that we get. Most notably, people living in RVs, clarified some items regarding portable storage, just small stuff that our enforcement staff runs into, and we wanted to give them more to work with. We didn't create any new zoning districts. We are proposing to remove the BN1 zoning district because there is only one parcel in the county zoned BN1, and the BN1 uses are pretty much exactly the same as BN, so we're consolidating that. And certainly the purpose of all of the various zoning districts remain the same. In terms of reorganization and clarification, instead of the long lists of permitted uses for every zoning district, we created a table, so it's easy reference. And we also created a section that describes the uses, again, trying to add more clarity to the ordinance. And we reference them to the NAICS code, the National Industrial Classification Code, to reflect economies as they change, to be able to address that as the economy changes, as uses change. It makes the ordinance much broader and easier to use. Here's an example of the permitted use table. It's in the document that you have. It's also, this has been posted on our website for close to 2 years at this point. And so for every use within every zoning district, a use is either permitted, indicated by the P, permitted with conditions, the PC. If it's a C, it's a conditional use. You all are familiar with those. CSP, conditional use site plan. Those are abbreviations you see with your applications. And then the PC/C, those are uses like home-based contractor, home occupations, where they can go through an administrative process. If an objection is received, then it can go through the public hearing process. So again, we've tried to include descriptions, definitions of each of the uses to provide additional clarity. And within each of the zoning districts, we've tried to address some challenges and address changes. For example, Delaware Code now doesn't require an acreage minimum to be considered a farm. So we reflected that very recent change. We consolidated a lot of agricultural support uses and by and large made them permitted with conditions rather than conditional uses to try to make it a little bit easier. Because generally when those conditional uses come through, there are no objections, there are no issues. So again, the uses on the screen, the agricultural support services, buggy repair, things like that, we've traditionally made go through conditional use, likely causing the applicant more expense and time lost than is necessary for the impact of use. So the conditions remain in place, but they're permitted. In the residential zoning districts, we added clarity relative to accessory dwelling units, both in response to what we hear from applicants as well as a recent court challenge. So we cleared up language to address that decision. We also are suggesting that cluster developments don't need to be a conditional use because they already are required to go through the public hearing process associated with a subdivision. So they'd be permitted just with the conditions. We also added, and this again is in response to community demand, short-term rental conditions, because we don't address those now in the code, and they do happen in the county. And we created, because home occupations are still effectively, they can be a conditional use, but home offices, which again, over the last several years have become even more prominent, have zero impact on surrounding neighbors. So we're proposing that as a new use that's simply permitted by right. And this is an individual office without customers coming to the office. Again, the home-based contractor, home occupations, we are suggesting they should be permitted with conditions. We are suggesting some changes to the conditions to home-based contractor, hours of operation, which traditionally have been shortened with each of those applications anyway. And then there is currently a requirement that the building for the home-based contractor be 30 feet behind the principal residential structure. And we have seen a number of variances to that. So we've loosened that. So it's got to be in the rear, it's got to be set back, but it's a little less stringent. Planned unit developments will remain a conditional use, but we are suggesting, in order to add a little bit more flexibility, reducing the minimum size for planned unit developments and allowing a density bonus for them if certain design criteria are met. And the design criteria included are modeled on the design criteria we already use for TDRs, the transfer of development rights, communities. Accessory structures, one of the problems we run into a lot is the desire to have, particularly in the rural areas, an accessory structure that's larger than the principal residential structure. So our suggestion is, let's start with simply allowing a 10% increase to the size of an accessory structure to build in a little more flexibility. We also are suggesting that we loosen the restrictions on front porches to accommodate houses, and to allow handicap ramps to be built without a setback to best accommodate homeowners. We created a couple of categories of institutional uses. Think of those as generally large-scale uses that serve the community, whether it be hospitals or a daycare. And that's just, it's not new uses, they're already allowed. We just reorganized them a little bit and offered some clearer definition. We also recategorized recreational uses into high-intensity recreation. Those would be uses that would involve heavier traffic, potentially noise, those sorts of things. they would remain conditional uses in AC and AR, NBN, permitted in BG where you expect more intense uses anyway. And then the category of low intensity recreation, think parks, golf courses, that sort of thing certainly wouldn't involve as much noise, et cetera. The campground standards are the same as they are. Motorsport standards are the same as they are right now. It's just they're recategorized. In commercial, this is probably the most notable for the business community. Our goal here, overall, our goal has been to make the ordinance easier to use and to make it easier to do business in the county. So what we've done in the commercial areas is essentially make zoning mean something. If you've got BG zoning, we've changed a lot of the uses from conditional to permitted, but with conditions. And again, those uses, for example, contractors' establishments, when they go through hearing, they don't get opposition. There tend not to be issues. And we find that we are costing applicants time and money that we probably don't need to. So we've shifted a number of uses that are listed to permitted, but still with the same conditions. We also, right now, drive-throughs are conditional use, and we were trying to find a way to eliminate the conditional use public hearing. The biggest concern with a drive-through is the actual drive-through lane and avoiding stacking, or managing stacking so it doesn't impact the right-of-way. So we've put together effectively site plan conditions that will address that, but alleviate the need to go through a public hearing process. Heavy commercial, the more intense uses, effectively stay the same. They'll generally be conditional use site plans just as they are now in BG, IG, and IL. We created a new category of use for mixed use, again, to add flexibility to the ordinance. So if there's a small piece, this happens more, or it seems more probable in the northern end of the county where you've already got a lot of development, where maybe you've got an infill piece and you could do a mix of residential and commercial. So that's a new use that's offered in the zoning ordinance. Shopping centers, we distinguished between sort of a neighborhood shopping center and a regional shopping center, which is not currently defined in our code, and the cutoff was 175,000 square feet. Under that, it's permitted. Over that, we figure that becomes far more regional and has more of an impact, so that remains a conditional use site plan. Industrial remains roughly the same as it is now. No dramatic changes. Outdoor storage in the industrial zoning district has been a thing we're hearing interest in, so we allow for that. But overall, the uses are not changing dramatically in how they're treated. We also are seeing, just out in the world, industrial parks are being used more and more often for commercial purposes. Whether it's offices, commercial recreation, vehicle repair, all sorts of uses are going to these available spaces, and right now they're not allowed. So the idea is to accommodate them because that's the direction the economy wants to go. So this ordinance would accommodate that. And then there's some uncategorized uses that didn't fit easily. Small scale wind and solar. The solar regulations are exactly what Levy Court has just recently adopted. We just pulled them into this ordinance. Same for large scale solar. We also incorporated large scale wind with a number of conditions, and that is restricted in where it can go. It mirrors solar, so it would not be permitted in AC and AR. And then telecommunication towers. This had been a request from Levy Court for quite some time because the existing ordinance, which I believe was adopted in either 2000 or early 2001, is incredibly complex, more so than the use probably calls for. So we minimized those regulations, kept setbacks, certainly trying to respect adjacent properties, but make it a little bit easier to navigate and effectively allow them similarly to home-based contractors, where you can notify adjacent property owners, and if no objection is received, we can approve them administratively. We also, recognizing changes in technology, called out small cell technology, which tends to be in the right-of-way but can be on structures depending on the surrounding area, and also allowed for stealth communication. We've seen a couple of these where it's a tower hidden in a light post or in a cupola, and it seems excessive to make that go through conditional use, so we've just allowed them as permitted. So that's effectively the permitted use section of the ordinance. It takes several sections within the existing code, turns it into one, and adds a great deal of clarity and I think a lot more flexibility. And then moving on to area and bulk regulations, this again, and I recognize the bulk of the ordinance looks intimidating, but it's a lot of deletions. The new stuff, all in blue, is where we've reformatted everything. So area and bulk regulations, again, instead of having defined area and bulk regulations in roughly a half a dozen places in the existing ordinance, you can find them in one. And we just put them all in a table, depending on their location, inside or outside the growth zone. We allowed for more flexibility with impervious cover. Road frontages, we also, there's an existing requirement of a 75-foot front setback on major roads that impedes development of a number of lots and uses up a lot of land. And no one has been able to identify where that requirement came from. We've discussed it with DelDOT. They do not have a preference for it to stay. So we're suggesting reducing that to 40 feet. That's outside of the right-of-way. So that's outside of whatever DelDOT right-of-way there already is. And then, again, for area and bulk regulations and non-residential, it's a 75% impervious cover across the board for commercial districts. And then finally, animals. And this is to try to solve an enforcement problem that we've been challenged with for years now. The code currently says any property may only have 4 domestic pets. And that was written likely long before we had state-run animal control, and we had a very, at this point we've got a really positive relationship with them. So what we're proposing is eliminate that 4 animal limit and focus instead on property maintenance and animal welfare. And then, because we see a lot of interest for particularly chickens, we actually lifted the City of Dover's regulations effectively for up to 5 chickens, no roosters, because chickens typically, when we get complaints, chickens aren't the problem, roosters are. So that is a synopsis of what this entire amendment does. It's 2 large sections of the ordinance being consolidated and a few things where we're trying to answer enforcement problems. I think it's important to note that we've been working on this project since 2016 as we can. It has been reviewed by the Home Builders Association, ACEC, which is the group of engineers. It's gone through levy court a couple of times. We've reviewed it. And we did a series of workshops in October for the public. So far, the input we've gotten has been incredibly positive. Since we sort of put the final draft together in the last several months, I don't think a week has gone by. We haven't had somebody at our counter who would be helped by what's in that ordinance. And in fact, just the past couple of weeks, we've had people say they're going to hold off. Presuming this gets adopted, they're going to hold off applying because this ordinance makes it easier for them to do business here. So That's effectively what the ordinance is. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, sir, for the presentation. And before I open it up to the commissioners, so you say this won't cause a difficulty between Nelson and Del-Dot because they won't accept the setbacks that we're proposing, correct?
Yeah, they couldn't tell us where the 75-foot came from either, so they were fine with the 40.
And the impervious cover going to 75%, that will be okay with the Conservation District? They'll still deal with the 5,000 square feet above that will be some kind of stormwater management?
Yeah, their rules don't change, and I actually had a conversation with Jared Atkins and said, dramatically, what if I got rid of impervious cover altogether? What if we didn't govern it? And he said that would be fine. So
that sounds very interesting. That sure does.
I think we'll continue that discussion, and you may see more revisions in the future, but he has no concern about what's being proposed here.
So under conditional uses, you've heard me talk, and I talked to you earlier about it, they'll still be coming before us, but all conditional uses go with the parcel and not with the person, correct?
With the exception of home-based contractors. That is the only exception in the code.
It's the only exception. Okay. So there will still be the term when surveyors or engineers are dealing with property, something can be existing non-conforming. Will that term still exist?
That section of the code is not changing at all. We want to make some revisions to it, again, to make it easier to use, but we're not touching that in this amendment.
So in other words, if you come before you with any kind of thing that's already there, there wouldn't be
legal
questions about that particular one continuing.
That stays, yes, in accordance with that section of the code, yes.
Yeah, I could sit here for an hour, but I won't go, and I'll open it up to other commissioners. Anybody on the phone, Mark, or anybody up front have any questions?
I do.
I'll let Mr. Davis first.
First of all, I think staff did a tremendous job. This has been an issue for many years. I've been around for a long time with these things, and I think they've done a real great job. And I think it's good for business. And there's just always been a lot of issues that really wasn't spelled out correctly. And as we move along, I think that what they've done is absolutely, and so I certainly commend Sarah and her staff and how they put this all together. I think they've done an excellent job. But I do have a couple questions, I guess. One question I had was 2 years ago, we had an application about the motorbike events down on Snake Road. And I think there was a feelings of the commissioners, they would like to approve it because we don't have that here for young people. And the problem was, as we all recall, that in order to make it work, it had to be light industrial. Well, that would just open the door for everyone else in that area. So obviously it got turned down. But my recollection is that because that was such a discussed issue, that when this committee met, they were going to try to accommodate that recreational part into one of the ordinances for the zoning. So I guess my question is, was it discussed, or has it not been discussed about what to do with those people, for young people, for sports? That's number one question.
Okay.
From Sarah.
Okay. It actually has been discussed. An ordinance was drafted back in the spring, but a levy court commissioner didn't want to pick up and run with it. But I've been working just these last couple of weeks with one of the incoming levy court commissioners who intends to pursue it once they take office.
So Sarah, is it an issue as to, I guess, where to put that type of recreation for young people? I don't know whether it should be an AC, AR, or just where to put it, because sometimes no matter where you put it, you end up with a problem. But I just felt that it should be brought up because we don't have nothing for the young people. And I think my feeling on the commission, that all the commissioners felt that it would be a nice thing to have, but we couldn't do it because it opened up a precedent if we would have changed that zoning to light industrial. So I would just say that this could be looked into. I think it'd be a great thing. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I just don't know where it should be put, but I think it should be really considered. That's number one. Thank you for your answer. Number two, at one time, and it may not be today, but Department of Natural Resources was issuing kennel permits. You could go to DNRAC and you could get a kennel permit for 100 dogs if you wanted to. And at that time, I think the county was 4 or 5, something of that nature. I know we had several years ago, we had a big hearing about the amount. So my question is, are we now consistent with Department of Natural Resources? Are we going to adopt this new ordinance, which I have no problem with, but is it going to be in conflict with the Department of Natural Resources, and have you talked to them about that?
It's actually handled through Office of Animal Welfare, I believe now, but it will not conflict. We'll actually eliminate a conflict that we were running into. And practically speaking, with the creation of the Office of Animal Welfare, enforcement, instead of relying on us for enforcement, they've been doing enforcement for animal welfare and in hoarding situations, and then call us in for the property maintenance. But in short, no conflict. We're actually eliminating one.
So I guess my real question really should be, is Animal Control under the state of Delaware authority now? Do they issue any kennel permits?
I can follow up.
At one time.
I can follow up with them directly because we haven't been dealing with kennel permits.
Yeah, I know several years ago, I mean, I'm talking about maybe 10, 15 years ago, that was a major issue, that the county had one ordinance that limited the amount of dogs, and the people would go over to DNRAC and get a permit for a kennel license for 100 dogs. So maybe you can get time to look into that. Other than that, I think you did a good job. I really do, because there's just been a lot of back and forth about what to do with some of these situations, and I think you've condensed it down to the point where there's just a lot of nice common sense put into the whole thing, and I thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. I appreciate that.
Mr. Mills, I think he has a few questions.
I'm going to do it real quick, and I'll be long, but the two questions I have is the two on there with the school bus parking. Well, is there any changes in that? And the other one was, the question is the agriculture weekend shows on their land. It's like once a year on a weekend.
Okay. With respect to school bus parking, there is a change. We made it easier. Instead of being a conditional use, it's permitted. It'll be treated the same way we do home occupations, effectively. Notify the property owners around you if there's no objection. And this is an ACNAR, not BG, right? Notify your neighbors. If there's no objection, you're good to go. What I think you're describing on farm properties are special events, not changing. Those are temporary activity permits, nothing changes. You're welcome.
On that school bus parking, is there a setback that's still required from the property lines?
The conditions haven't changed. We didn't change that, we just changed process.
So in other words, the setback's still required on how they how far they park from the property.
Yeah.
Mr. Garvey?
Sarah, forgive me if this answer is self-explanatory, but I just don't know it. I think this is outstanding, and it's clear that you guys have been working a long time on it, and it's a really good step forward. My only concern, it's not really a concern, it's more of a question at this point. The difference between the administrative approval process and the public hearing approval process, will be altered in a number of ways, because a lot of these things will now just fall under administrative approval and no longer come in front of us. And new uses that have been added may also fall under administrative approval and not come under this. So I'm thinking of the public. I'm just wondering, is there a legitimate concern from the public's point of view of not having due access to some of these changes, because it'll just be passed through the administrative process unless someone's aware enough to complain, and then of course it would come in front of us. So I'm just kind of trying to get my mind around all of these changes, which I don't understand them on item by item by item because I haven't been here long enough. Is it going to, in the end, I think overall is going to be beneficial to everybody, but I'm just wondering about the check and balance in terms of public access to this type of change.
As we approached the permitted use question, particularly because I think what you're really interested in are the uses that are changing from conditional to permitted with conditions. Those we chose primarily based on the zoning. Those are in the BG zoning district primarily, and some in the ACNAR for agricultural support uses. So they're very, very low impact anyway. And in BG, because it's the most intensive zoning district, we figured a little more flexibility would be warranted. And we only targeted the uses that when they've gone through conditional use haven't gotten negative feedback, right? So we went for the simplest ones, the ones with less impact. And for anything of a substantial size, while it might not be a conditional use, it would still be a site plan. So it would still come to this body for review.
Thank you.
Do you
I have another
anticipate this
question, Bill.
actually lowering the applications that come to us?
It could.
That sounds good. As long as we come here and just see each other, that would be great each month. Is there somebody else on the phone, Mark, that's trying to say something?
Yeah, I have another question.
Mr. Davis, you may go ahead.
I have a question. What is the process, if it's included in this proposed zoning, about any appeal from an administrative decision? Has it changed from what it was before, or is it no longer in effect?
No, nothing there changes. None of that changes.
So there is a right of appeal to somebody if they disagree with the administrative position. Is that correct?
Always. The county administrator is an option for appeal. The Board of Adjustment is an option for appeal. Every application has an option for an appeal.
Okay. Can your decision also be appealed to the Planning Commission?
That typically, not for zoning. A zoning appeal goes to the Board of Adjustment. Appeals to anything from Chapter 187, our subdivision and land development regulations, that's appealable to you all.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Does any other commissioners have any questions? If not, I'll open it up for the public, and I see a public that's coming to the mic. Good evening, Mr. Pardee. Welcome. I understand, being you're an attorney, you will not have to be sworn.
Good evening, Mr.
Just give
Chairman.
your name and address.
Members of the Commission, for the record, John Pardee with the law firm Baird, Dallas, Brockstedt, Federico, and Cardia. It's a mouthful. We recently expanded. So thank you for the opportunity to offer comment. I want to give a special thanks to Sarah and her staff. I think they've done a fabulous job with this. It's a huge undertaking. And I remember the 1972 ordinance very well because I was county attorney from 1995 until the early 2000s, and I used to lug that big blue book with all of the amendments that were adopted over the years. And I will tell you that this ordinance before you is much easier to read, to understand, to interpret, and apply. And I think for the staff and for the public and the applicants who will come before you in the future, I think this is just a vast improvement, and Sarah and her staff deserve all the credit for that. The staff gave some of us an opportunity to comment early on, and I appreciate that, as well as the fact that they listened and took some of our comments to heart. Like any document of this magnitude, I don't agree with 100% of it. I probably agree with 99% of it. But look, it strikes a great balance between all of the competing interests and concerns that you have as planners and administrators and decision makers in land use, which is a very complex thing. So I couldn't be more proud and happy to see this happen and to offer my wholehearted support and endorsement. I encourage you to adopt it, and I look forward to seeing it implemented. So thank you very much.
I certainly thank you, Mr. Pardee, for taking your time to come in. Does anybody have any questions? Any commissioners for Mr. Pardee? If not, once again, thank you for your time, and we appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Last call. Is there anybody here that's even here? I mean, anybody here have any comments on the phone about for or against these ordinance?
If there's anyone joining us online that would like to make comments either for or against this application, please raise your electronic hand at this time. I see no hands raised online, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, and thank you for everybody's comment. And once again, I really express my appreciation to sir with all the time, because just looking at a book, I can imagine what went through this just to put it in place and to have it all there. And as Mr. Pardee say, you might not agree with 100% of it, but it's a starting point, and like we did with other projects that come here, like the solar, it could be changed in the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I was remiss. I wish I'd said it when Mr. Pardee was still here. I am very grateful to the folks out in the community, including John, the Home Builders Association, ACEC, a number of community folks read the ordinance for us and gave feedback, and that was very, very helpful. And yeah, no ordinance is final. It'll keep changing, but I think this is a big move. So thank you.
It's a project in the works, like you say, and I can really appreciate what you had to go through with DelDOT and the Conservation District, having to deal with them myself. So we'll be taking this up next week. Thank you all for your comments. Final application tonight is LC 22-21, Wind Energy Moratorium, an ordinance to amend Kent County Code Volume 1, Chapter 158, Moratoriums, as amended by adding a new subsection relating to acceptance of conditional use site plan applications for public utilities / public utility uses, wind energy systems. I'll throw it back to you, Sarah, if you'd like to expand on what we talked about.
Thank you. This ordinance is being brought forward at the request of one of the Levy Court Commissioners, concerned that we would get a proposal for a wind energy system. We have not received any there, and we've heard no interest. So this creates a moratorium to allow time to create regulations. And if you recall, I mentioned briefly when we discussed the last ordinance, the new Chapter 205 or the Chapter 205 changes incorporate wind regulation already. So if this is adopted by the end of the month, we will have already resolved it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I know you say you've had no applications or anything. Have you ever had an inquiry about a wind system at all?
Certainly not a large-scale system, and we've got individual windmills on some places. The county actually did a study many, many years ago now. Hans Medlars was still the Public Works Director. We were looking at alternative energy options down at the wastewater treatment plant, because that's an enormous power user. So he did a study to see if wind would work. And it came back that it's just not cost effective. It won't generate enough energy. It wouldn't generate the amount of energy we needed, and it certainly wouldn't pay for itself. So the county actually installed solar.
Understood.
I have a question.
Very much. I'll now open this up to the commissioners. Anybody online or here at the table have any questions or of Sarah
Yes.
about this particular wind energy
Yes.
moratorium? Did I hear somebody?
Yeah, me. So I have a question. If we adopt an ordinance for the wind, what type of land are they going to be on? CAR? What are they going to be allowed?
In the proposed zoning ordinance we just discussed, they're limited to BG the same way large-scale solar is. So they could not be on AC and AR.
What? I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Okay, it would not be permitted on AC or AR land. It would be limited
Okay.
only to BG, just like utility solar is.
Okay, I was a little concerned we was going down that same road as we did with the solar panels, so I just want to make sure.
No,
All right,
we
thank
tried to
you.
address it.
All right, thank you.
I would recommend as you get into this and looking into the wind, it's quite different. Having studied some of the fire patterns as far as the fire service, it's quite an interesting thing about how they need to be maintained and when they do catch on fire. And I certainly recommend that you have the fire service involved with anything that you get into. Anybody else here? Anybody here? Not seeing anybody here. Is anybody on the line that's either for or against this and would like to speak?
I have my hand raised. This is Denise.
Go ahead, Denise. Good to hear from you.
Well, when I read this the other day, I didn't even finish reading it because I just have to be honest. It seemed like a waste of time and energy for the planning department because it's absurd to think that we would ever have an land wind farm in the state of Delaware. We know that the only thing that's being studied and actually is in process, I suppose, is offshore and not off the shore of the bay, which is what Kent County is in. It's off the shore of the ocean, on the ocean. So I just had to make a comment that to me, this seemed like a waste of time for everyone involved, since no company would have anything to do with putting a wind farm on land and flat land. I mean, where have we on the East Coast ever seen wind farms? I can tell you that from many states, it's in the top of very high mountain areas. So I feel like I have to apologize to the time that's been put into writing this ordinance. That's it.
I think that's a good point because the county line does go to the center of the Delaware River. So when you get into things that are happening here or on land or on the water, we are involved with it when you come right down to it. So you got to be very careful. And that's a good point, Denise. Thank you for your comments. Anybody else here have any comments? If not, then we'll be taking this wind ordinance up next week. Thank you very much. Seeing no public here, is there any public on the phone that has public comment? Mark?
If there's anyone that's joining us online that would like to make public comments, please raise your hand at this time. I see no hands raised, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Going down to commission comments. Is there anyone on the phone or here at the table who would like to have anything to say before we get done with tonight's meeting? It looks like it's clear. So down to other business. Is there any other business anybody has for the commission? So seeing none, I'll then offer for an adjournment and a second.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Sarah, call the commission.
Mr. Peterman?
Yes to adjourn.
Mr. Servon?
Yes to adjourn.
Mrs. Karcher?
Yes to adjourn.
Mr. Galvry?
Yes to adjourn.
Mr. Mills?
Yes to adjourn.
Mr. Davis?
Yes to adjourn.
Mr. Jester?
Yes. Thank you all, and we'll see you next week. This meeting is adjourned.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.